This is the Morning Swim Show for Monday, July 11th, 2011. I'm your host, Peter Bush. In the Phoenix Monitor today, we'll talk to Steve Munatones. He's always been our go-to guy on open water swimming, and he just wrote a book on the topic. Steve joins us right now in the Phoenix Monitor from Huntington Beach, California. Hey, Steve, it's been too long. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing fine, thank you.
Tell us about the book.
The book is actually a culmination of my 3+ decades in the sport. It covers everything: equipment, racing, tactics, techniques, historical information, stuff on Olympic 10K marathon swim, solo swims, relays. Everything I've learned and everything I've seen over the last 30+ years is in that book. So
you cast a wide net.
Yes. Yes, it's and that's absolutely necessary in the sport of open water swimming. It includes everybody of all ages and abilities. Right now, the sport is growing at faster than one new event per day, and people are coming from all walks of life, and therefore the net necessarily has to be cast widely.
I was going to say, you can certainly speak with authority on the increasing popularity and the significant boost in popularity open water swimming has seen in the past few years.
Yeah. Well, if you look at every sport that's added to the Olympics, whether it's taekwondo, beach volleyball, snowboarding, triathlon, the sport itself gets a tremendous boost in global awareness and the number of participants and the number of events held. And that, with 2008 in Beijing, when open water swimming was first, I'll say, reintroduced to the Olympic calendar, now we're seeing the benefits of that.
Is there enough historical perspective to look back and say, he or she were the best open water swimmers of all time?
I believe everybody has a different opinion, because you can look at the English Channel as a standard, for example. You can look at the Olympic 10K marathon swim as a standard. Or you can look at people who just do tremendously difficult solo challenges, like Lynn Cox, when she swam the Bering Strait from Alaska to Russia. Or you could look at Lewis Pugh, the first man to swim literally across the magnetic North Pole. There's so many ways to define the sport's greatest athletes. And so if you look at cold water swimming, you've got a certain amount of people. If you look at speed, you have another group of people. If you look at the English Channel, you have another group of people. So depending on how you define the sport, you can look at some of the greatest athletes in that particular area.
Was the English Channel sort of the beginning of open water swimming? The first people who did that, it all spawned from there?
Absolutely. I mean, people have been swimming in the open water for millennia. I mean, pools, historically speaking, are relatively new to the sport of swimming. And back in 1875, Captain Matthew Webb crossed the English Channel in almost 24 hours, and that spread around the world at the time, and it really opened up people's eyes as to what people can do. I mean, to actually think to swim from one country to another back in 1875 was just unthinkable, and he did it, and that really led to literally 130 years of continuous growth in the sport.
Is there a danger in that game that we're playing, though? Okay, you can do this, but I can do one more. I mean, we've talked to some people on this show who have done what I think a lot of people would characterize as flat out dangerous. I mean, either because of the temperature of the water they were swimming in without a wetsuit or the pure distance. And some have acknowledged, during the actual swim, they had serious medical issues that the doctor later said, you were this close from perhaps dying. I mean, is that part of the risk, obviously, that goes into this, and people will continue to push those boundaries?
Absolutely. The risk, the danger is there, and that also paradoxically leads to the allure of open water swimming. Whether it's hypothermia or hyperthermia, whether it's swimming with sharks or swimming through schools of Portuguese man-of-war, this sport is risky. Now, what we're trying to do in this sport in general are two very important aspects of minimizing that risk. And one is educating the race directors or the escort crew as to how do you prevent an athlete from injuring himself or herself or killing themselves. And the second is educating the athlete and the athlete's coach as to how should they properly prepare the human body and themselves mentally in order to achieve their goals. So, you know, through those activities worldwide, hopefully we'll be minimizing the risks at the same time that humans just naturally are pushing themselves further and further in colder or warmer waters around the world.
Do you, looking ahead, see one that's, you know, is very tantalizing to an open water swimmer, one that there's been buzz about, that someday somebody's going to do that one, but it still seems a little too risky at this point?
Actually, every time someone does an unbelievable swim, basically all they do is they plant the seed into another human's mind about doing a one-up. You know, Diana Nyad is going to be swimming 103 miles between Cuba and Florida. If and when she achieves that, somebody is going to come down the line and try to one-up her. We've seen it in relays, the distance relays for marathon swimming relays. The world record is getting farther and farther and farther along. So that's the lure of open water. You always want to do one better, either for yourself or relative to your colleagues in the sport.
I know. I swear there's going to be a day when there's going to be 8 guys who get together and swim the Indian Ocean or something.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
well,
you know, the wheels get turning.
Absolutely. And this is interesting. Years ago, if you swam in waters that are 50 degrees, that was considered cold. Now, I would say 5-6 years ago, swimming in 40-degree waters was considered to be very cold. And now we literally have thousands of people around the world doing swims in waters that are close to freezing in the 30s. So we went from 55 was cold to 45 was cold to 35 is the new cold. And people just continue to push themselves, and physiologically and psychologically we are learning that the human body is entirely adaptable to such conditions if they do it intelligently.
Do we know if people who have attempted these swims or accomplished these extreme open water swims later down the road, a decade or two, if they have significant health problems because of it?
No, not yet. We have not done any research as to the long-term effects of serious physiological stress due to marathon swims or, you know, extreme temperatures. That being said, I think everybody in the aquatics world knows that swimming as a lifelong pursuit is the healthiest means to stay physically fit. So again, when they do one particular swim of even if it's 1 hour or 10 hours, they do a lot of training behind that, and I believe that training has much more positive benefits than that one-off swim that might have some negative connotations to it.
All right, switching gears for a moment now, we have the Open Water World Championships coming up.
Yeah.
Who do you like to win this year in the 10K?
I think the pre-race favorites on the men's side would include Thomas Lures of Germany. It would include Valerio Cleary of Italy, and it will include Alex Meyer of the United States. But in open water swimming, just like we saw in the Beijing Olympics, the pre-race favorites always don't come out on top. Now, that being said, this is a qualification for the London Olympics. So you're fighting for the 10 places to get there. On the women's side, I could literally name 6 women who could be on top of that podium. One would be Eva Fabian of the United States, Christine Jennings of the United States, Carrie-Anne Payne of Great Britain. We have the Italians, Martina Grimaldi, and one of her teammates who will be named later. We have the Brazilians, Poliana Okimoto and Ana Marcela. The women's field is stacked with great swimmers, and it's going to be a true battle in Shanghai.
A little bit tougher to call then on the women's side, do you think?
You know, the thing with the difference between men and women in the 10K, it's very interesting. Women, they shoot off the gun and they go for it. They hit the water and their heart rate is pumping. They swim hard for 2 hours. We look at their split times, we look at their pace throughout the race, and the women just go for it. The men, on the other hand, the gun goes off, they swim hard for a little bit to get around the first buoy, and then they settle back, they dial down. And they basically just play chess for 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers. And then they all decide, well, you know, we've got 2 or 3 or 4 kilometers to go. Maybe now it's time to go hard. And the men, the last 2K is blazing fast. So the men and women approach this sport differently, at least they have over the last 3 years. The women just basically go for it. It's an aerobically challenging, gut-busting 2-hour challenge. The men appear to be much more strategic and tactical, and then they put the pedal to the metal at the last part of the race.
That's interesting, and that must obviously change the way they have to train to be able to succeed in those big events.
Absolutely, and that's how it was actually in Beijing. The man who won in Beijing, he focused literally on that last ending sprint. Everything in his training was geared for that last 800 meters to really come through. And he basically drafted for 9.5 kilometers. The women, on the other hand, even in Beijing, they just went for it. The top 3 women around the first buoy were the top 3 women at the end of the race. And they just aerobically challenged everybody to keep up with them, and they're all medalists now. Now, that being said, is that going to be true for London? It remains to be seen.
You got me all excited to watch the World Championships and next year's Olympic Championships in the open water now.
Yeah, yeah. No, the course in London is absolutely fantastic. It is the most technically challenging course that I know of. It's 6 loops. Supposedly there will be 11 buoys around there, so that is 66 turns you're basically doing, 66 changes in directions during a 10K race. The person who comes out ahead at that Olympic 10K marathon swim truly will be an Olympic champion.
Well, you're going to have to do some serious studying of that course before you hit the water. I mean, you know, like an IndyCar driver studying a course. I mean, you literally have to know, okay, after a certain amount, it's about turn time.
Yeah, well, not only that, it's a dynamic situation where not only do you need to know yourself, you need to have a very high navigational IQ, but also you need to react or either supersede what your competitors will do. Yes, everybody knows I need to do a right-hand turn, but I have to do a right-hand turn with 25 other women around me. And where do I need to be positioned? Because as soon as I do a right-hand turn, well, guess what? I've got to do this little straightaway and then do another right-hand turn. So it's a game of chess out there, in addition to be, aerobically challenging to be swimming that fast for 2 hours.
Very interesting. Well, I'm glad we had you on. Yeah. And the book's a great read, so everyone go buy it.
Thank you.
Steve, appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And just a reminder, you can buy the book in the Swimming World Swim Shop. Steve Munatones joining us. That is it for today's show. I'm Peter Bush, reminding you to keep your head down at the finish.